officials are seen out in public. Waters says nobody from the Trump administration should be welcome anymore, anywhere. It's shocking. Watch.
I can't stand her. I hate her. Maxine Waters, she's a libtard. She's dumber than hell. Maxine Waters, dumber than hell.
That have been booed out of restaurants.
Boo you out of a restaurant, dumbass.
No sleep. No gas, no sleep. And guess what? We're gonna win
The ugly as all hell,
because
too.
while you try and quote the Bible, Jeff Sessions and others, you really don't know the Bible. God is on our side.
Yeah, right.
On the side of the children. On the side of what's right. On the side of what's honorable. On the side of understanding that if we can't protect the children, we can't protect anybody.
She don't care about
Let's stay the course. Let's make sure we show up wherever we have to show up. And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere.
Oh, yeah.
God is on the side of the children, ye Planned Parenthood supporter. Remember during the 2016 campaign when Democrats were constantly pretending that Donald Trump's rhetoric incited violence? And then remember when Project Veritas released undercover videos of paid agitators plotting violence against the Trump campaign and Trump supporters? And remember when Hillary Clinton's campaign was in the know about that plan for agitation and violence? Remember at the Trump campaign rallies when liberals pepper sprayed an 8-year-old girl who was attending the rally with her parents? Remember when the radical left threw rocks at police horses, flipped police cars, and blocked off highways because they hated Donald Trump so much? People, these calls for violence from the left are not new. This is the Democratic Party. This is not the fringe. This isn't just Antifa on the campus of UC Berkeley. This is who the Democratic Party is. Congresswoman Maxine Waters is just the one who happened to tell the truth about what the Democrats want. But anybody who's been paying attention in the past 2 years to what the Democrats are actually doing won't be surprised that the Punch-a-Nazi crowd, the same bunch who inspired a radical to shoot up the congressional baseball game because he didn't like Donald Trump, of course they're calling for violence. Joining me now, host of the Michael Knowles Show at the Daily Wire, Michael Knowles. Michael, good to see you.
Liz, good to see you.
All right, Michael, am I wrong here? I mean, it's pretty hard to convince me that this is just the fringe of the Democratic Party at this point. This is who the Democrats are. The leadership isn't even condemning this kind of rhetoric from Maxine Waters.
This is the leadership, and you see it all the time when we're talking about civility or this. They say, well, look, some random guy at a Trump rally said something mean one time. You say, right, that's true. But a major Democrat congresswoman, Maxine Waters, I think she's been around since the Jurassic era at this point. She's the one calling for gang violence. And it is worth wondering, what is it with the Democrats and gangs these days? They've spent the last few weeks defending MS-13, gangs crossing the border. Now they're saying you need to have gang violence and go and terrorize Republican politicians and their families, by the way. Let's not forget, if you say go over and no peace, no sleep, keep them awake at night when you see them in their homes, that means terrorize their families too. The way that walls work, I know Democrats don't know a lot about walls, but the way that walls work is that if you can't just keep awake the guy in this room and not the little kids in this room. It is a bizarre campaign strategy as we go into the midterms. Mike Huckabee posted a tweet the other day. It was a bunch of these MS-13 guys with face tattoos, not looking very nice. And he said, this is the Democrat campaign committee. This is Pelosi's dream team. And then Maxine Waters proves him right. They're calling for gang violence. It's a mob mentality. And this is not just some random, strange, crazy thing on the left. This has been going on since the 1960s. Half a century ago, the left said, the personal is the political. Everything that is political is personal. We're going to go and we're going to destroy your personal lives. We're just seeing the flowering of that now in Maxine Waters. Nancy Pelosi tried to tamp this down, but there's no appetite to tamp it down. The left is out for blood. They're not just disagreeing with people. They're not trying to stop an agenda. They're trying to destroy individuals and it's ripping apart the fabric of the civil society.
Well, I think, too, that the change between now and the 1960s, because you're right, this type of strategy was employed by the leftist radicals of that time, the Weather Underground, other domestic terrorists, far-left domestic terrorist groups here, but for the first time, they sort of dropped the camouflage, the mainstream left has, and they have stopped deflecting verbally away from what they're doing, because in the past they've been sort of like an illusionist. They've been like, oh, look at what I'm doing over here, look at what I'm saying, and then secretly over to the left they're enacting their radical liberal policies. Well, Maxine Waters just dropped that act. She dropped the camouflage. She's saying, no, I'm just going to say what we want you to do. We want you to harass these people. They don't care, by the way, that they're kids. Remember, Michael, kids are complicit in this, just like Ivanka Trump's son was in that photograph, just like Barron Trump was, which elicited that hateful tweet from Peter Fonda. The kids are complicit here. Democrats don't care about the children. They even targeted Sarah Huckabee Sanders' children when she was eating at that restaurant. She was there with her family, and they ran her out.
Oh, of course. Maxine Waters is probably one of the most pro-abortion people in the United States, and she just says, we need to protect the children, unless we want to kill them. But we need to protect all the ones that I say we want to protect. It's a sham, and it's because the left behave like children. They call for civility, but civility, it comes from citizen, right? It's civilis. It's how citizens relate to one another. If you want to be civil, you need to have virtue. The founders and the framers talked about this all the time. You need a virtuous public that behaves like adults, that's mature, that can speak to one another in an adult way. Donald Trump said to Jimmy Fallon over the weekend, he said, act like a man. People need to grow up and act like a man. But the left, all you get from them, right up to the head of the DMC, Tom Perez, you get all this profanity, this screaming, this childish rhetoric, and these really childish, sophomoric attacks on people. You're not going to have a civil society unless people grow up a little bit, act like adults. And you'd think that Maxine Waters, in her 7,000 years in Congress, might have gotten the message on that, but unfortunately, they're still behaving like children.
No, and that's almost an insult to children at this point. I mean, I don't see a lot of kids going out and inciting mobs to go and surround other children's houses. Kids just play, they argue, and they get over it. Maybe Democrats should actually take a little advice from how children operate, because they get over it eventually. In my opinion, this just shows us, too, that Democrats do not have any ground to stand on complaining about any of the tweets from President Trump, any of the off-the-cuff remarks that he ever says. They have no grounds whatsoever, no justification to ever complain about the tone of voice that any Republican ever uses, because they have actively called for mob violence against people that they disagree with politically. That is anew in our country, and shame on them for bringing that. Michael, we're out of time. Thanks for being here. All right, guys, don't go anywhere. The Supreme Court sends the case of Barronelle Stutzman, the florist who declined to make flower arrangements for a gay wedding, back to the Washington State Supreme Court, and tells the court to take into consideration the most recent Supreme Court ruling on Masterpiece Cake Shop. What this means for religious liberty, we're going to break it down next. Plus, a new book called Outrage Incorporated perfectly encapsulates how the left pushes their agenda. They don't care about principle. They use outrage to exploit people's emotions every time to get their way. The author of that book is with us shortly. Stay with us.